Hey guys, this is Infinite Flash here. Today I'm going to be talking about what happened in Game 1 of the World Championship hosted in Sochi, Russia, if I'm not mistaken. In this game we have Anand playing Carlsen in their match from last year, where Carlsen won and Anand is looking for revenge in this match. And, well, you can only imagine the excitement that is over this match since everyone is pretty much picking Carlsen, but a lot of people think that Anand is having a good chance to rebound since he's played better this year. But of course, Carlsen is still the favorite. After all, he's a younger player and already beat Anand just last year. So, without much else to say, let's see what happened in this game one. In this game, Anand started off with d4, and we quickly get pretty much a mainline Grunfeld defense where white has quite a number of options with e4 and a lot of potential potential to and a lot of variety in setups that he can choose. But Anand chose a really solid option in bishop d2 today, and after this, the play can pretty much evolve. Black can play knight b6, but I think what Carlsen is choosing is pretty much good since bishop g7 is pretty much forcing white to play e4 here, the natural one. And the idea of bishop d2 is in fact to, when black recaptures here, to take here on c3. Also, one point of bishop d2 is when black plays knight b6, you're able to play bishop e3, and now you have this strong center supported with your minor pieces here. Anyways, that's a bit of a digression. Castles, yeah, and here, I mean, I would have suspected that Anand would have played, just knight f3, and would have gotten some normal mainline Grunfeld stuff here when probably just c5 comes, and I don't know what else white does other than d5. Takes, and I don't know, probably bishop g4. Black goes for some dark square strategy here, and is really doing quite fine in this position. Although at first it might look more appealing for white, though. That could have happened, but well, Anand chose queen d2, a pretty interesting option, really. And the normal move c5, I guess, is probably just met by d5, right? And the captures is not so bad for black again, and this could have happened as well. But I guess Anand wanted to keep. I don't know. Carlsen just wanted to play a little bit more solidly than to allow this kind of structure to happen. So he played the knight out to c6 first, and both players are just focused on getting their development in, and bishop g4 attacking this knight and trying to coordinate on this pawn is a pretty reasonable option. And in this position, there's not much else that white can do than to push, really. And since the d pawn was attacked, he pushes, and there's a lot of tension in the position already, with everything being somewhat attacked in this kind of position. So Carlsen makes the first capture of the game to allow his knight to get to this square. Since this knight was controlling that square. So once after this captures, Anand decided to capture on g7. King takes. He certainly doesn't have to capture on g7, but he would prefer that the dark squared bishops are off the board, since this is the main defender of these important squares that are potentially weak in black's position. So Anand captured, king takes, g takes, and now knight e5 by Carlsen. Yeah, here it's already an interesting position. You don't see this kind of pawn structure that often unless you are a Grunfeld player from the white side. This pawn structure is potentially really dangerous, actually, for black. But I think black is pretty solid in these kind of positions. Certainly white could have proceeded with bishop e2, and we would have gotten the same kind of game structure. But Anand really wanted to really keep a fight in the not a fight, but like keep the position really sharp, I guess, with castling long here. At first, this kind of looks potentially dangerous, and you can kind of see Carlsen's next move being really reasonable with c6. Unfortunately, you just cannot capture this pawn because queen c3, and you're losing the knight due to this fork right here between these two pieces, and there's no way to protect the knight while being in check. So And there are certainly other reasonable moves with e6 and other moves of that kind of, but c6 looks just really natural to me. And in here we kind of see this forcing sequence with queen c3 pinning this knight, and there's no room for like a move like queen c7 or queen d6 because of f4 pinning this knight to the king over here. So you are forced to play f6 after queen c3 when f4 is not leading to the loss of material here. And in fact, I think that black would continue with knight f7 here, and probably white would just capture the pawn over here, and given this attack, maybe queen c7, and certainly an interesting position where there is a lot of compensation for black, and I don't think this kind of structure is really what white wants with the rooks coming to c8 here and coming upon the white king, and that doesn't look so great. I don't know. I mean, maybe e5 here. I don't know. Just trying to break open the position and trade off this bad pawn and open up these lines towards the white king here is a good idea. But I don't know. Probably a queen trade would happen, and black has really no problems in this kind of position. So not f4, but instead Anand wanted to make sure that a rook is not coming to c8. This is really annoying if you're white. I mean, you just don't want to see c takes d and rook c8 happen with your king and queen along this file already. So that's why he played bishop h3. Kind of an unusual move, but it makes sense since you're controlling this square that the rook wants to go to. Yeah, and in this position, Carlsen just decided to capture on d5, and well, Anand definitely wanted to really keep a strong fight in the position, so he took with the pawn, maintaining really strong control over the square. And there's always this potential to push the pawn here and really just break through the position with your rooks eventually. Although that's extremely difficult at the moment. And here Anand just wisely retreated the knight over here to the f7 square to have firm control over the square and possibly blockade with either piece. Here, sorry, Carlsen decided to do that. Here, I mean, Anand knows that he has control over the c8 square just for the moment, so he decides to take a little bit of space away from the knight and potential like pawn breaks here that black might have in the future. And there's always these ideas to put some pressure on the position right here and push f5 eventually to try to maintain a control over black's setup right over here. And this move is just a strengthening move, really. So yeah, in this position, Anand could have played knight d6, but I think he wanted to allow this rook c8 move at some point. So he decided to bring out the queen. He could certainly play queen b6 or some queen up move, but he chose queen d6 first. And I guess the idea is just to make sure this d pawn is not coming at all, and you can really just start to maneuver around this weak pawn potentially if white is not protecting it properly. Anand really wanted to get his queen off the file right over here, so he decided to go queen d4 and support the pawn, keep this pawn inactive because it is pinned to the king. This is not so comfortable for black because he's not really able to gain firm control over the e6 squares if he can't push the f pawn. There's bishops always looking at here this square, so rook d8, putting some pressure on the pawn, and Anand decided to just protect the pawn here. Really strong and safe position, really, in my opinion. And well, I mean, clearly white also can go with a few other options. King b1 doesn't look that bad, and you don't really want to capture. This is kind of insane. I think probably because of rook a8, probably. When you're probably even losing the game right now. Not losing, but not losing. Sorry about the guys. But you are allowing a lot of dangerous counterplay. Maybe if you take b7, probably just takes anyways, and well, this looks extremely dangerous, really, with the rook coming to b8 and b2, and this looks very uncomfortable. So bishop b6, queen b6. Yeah, queen b6. I mean, black really doesn't have many other options, I guess, at this point, because he'd like to get now his knight here, since he's brought his queen out and developed his rooks in this kind of position. Yeah, queen b6 looks pretty natural. I mean, clearly he could have played queen a6 as well, not keeping the queens on, but Carlsen is kind of annoyed by the lack of space that he has in this position, while white has just more room for his pieces around in the center right over here in these open lines. So black really wants to trade off one piece to help facilitate all this. Notice that if you go queen takes b6, black is going to play knight d6, and he really has no problems in this position, I think. Not too many, at least. And well, after knight c7, black is really comfortably controlling all of the pawns in the center, and, well, you don't want to do that for black. You don't want to help him out. So you play queen d2, keeping the queens on the board. Now rook d6. Clearly, I mean, he could also go... he could also go, I think, knight d6 in this kind of position. There's nothing wrong with this move. And I don't know, rook here, and probably bring the knight in, queen somewhere, and this position's pretty interesting, really. White definitely has potential to push the h pawn here and try to open up the file for these rooks, or move the bishop back and try to pressure this pawn here on the e7 square. I think this position's quite okay for black, though. I don't see why black should be really worried, even though this bishop is controlling these squares. None of white's position seems that dangerous at the moment here. Excuse me. So in this position, black decided to play rook d6, I guess, and to allow knight d8. I think that's the idea, and eventually kick this bishop out and try to figure out his plan from there. Maybe once this bishop is gone from the protection of the d5 square, then black can try to organize threats against this pawn here. h1, and now knight d8. Yeah, here, I mean, it's not right if you play like bishop g4, You're allowing black to play e6, and you're not really getting anything in this kind of position if you're white. I mean, just a whole bunch of trades, right? But even black is ending up with a better structure slightly. So maybe even he can play for the advantage, who knows? King b2, king f7. I don't know, I think even black is more preferable because of the better pawn structure, but it's nothing serious. White is good at rook activity and really should be okay there. So I mean, I don't really see an improvement in that line because black has to take all this stuff. And I mean, what are you going to do after e6? You're just planning to take here with probably the rook, and there's nothing really white can do about that. So that's why he kept the bishop here and decided to play the f-pawn advance to this square. And in this kind of position, I think Carlsen makes a good decision by just chopping off this annoying bishop, and Anand just took back with the rook, pretty reasonable. And Carlsen pretty much makes a reasonable move with queen c7 check first. He could also play rook c8. It's not much of a difference, really. I mean, getting the rook active here, but you can also think about taking this, but it's kind of the same structure, really. I mean, takes, and queen d6 or whatever, check first. And queen d6 is extremely solid for black, and I don't think black should be worse at all, in fact. So not that. Queen c7. Okay, and king b1 happened, getting out of the file right over here, and I think this is pretty natural. Rook c8, rook d1, captures. I mean, certainly he could play with the d pawn, but then black would just take the open file. So, and he doesn't really want to take with the f pawn because he's lost all the pressure against this, and we kind of get the same structure as before, where white doesn't really have anything. So rook takes is like the only way to really stay active in this kind of position, and probably after this, I mean, probably after this, I think that black would play rook d8 and try to really get annoying threats on the position here, and probably white would play queen e3 to threaten rook takes e7, rook d7. This is actually what happened. Sorry, guys. And there's always this tension in this kind of position where black has to be a little bit careful about these threats, but he should be able to hold this position. And in this position, Anand decided to simplify matters here with the strong move d6, and black has three options to take it, but only one of them work. Queen takes is obviously dropping the queen. Rook takes is dropping the queen as well with the rook e7 check on the king and queen right here. So pawn takes pawn is the only move, and now the nice move queen d4, double attacking that pawn right over there, where black is forced to play rook f7, captures, and now rook d6, where white has extremely good activity, but black has a good pawn structure. So I think white should be able to do. I think it should end in a draw pretty fairly, but they played it out for a few more moves. So a6, pretty natural move, just protecting against the threat of queen a7 at some point. It's just a nice move to play eventually. And a3 to run with the king here instead of just in case of a check to the back rank here by the queen, and you don't want to lend it have a king ending up on c2 instead of a2. Queen h5, activating the queen. 4, queen h5, queen d2, keeping everything together. Queen c5, rook d5. But you can see black making a little bit of progress here. Slight progress. Queen c6. Okay, clearly we could have just had a dead drawn position right here with rook takes f7, but he wanted to keep the rooks on the board. Queen e4, king a2, rook e7, queen c1, a5. I wonder if a4 somehow get queen to f7. Maybe you could make something out of this, a little something for black, but it's probably still drawn. That's dead drawn. Queen f1, just keeping everything together. There's nothing really bad about white's position, really. a4, rook d1. I wouldn't have been so comfortable with this, such a passive-looking move. Move like queen e6 comes to mind, forcing the king back in, probably just activating the rook to c7, but again, probably just white plays rook c1 after that in this kind of position. And I don't see the problem for white at all. He just opposes the rook wherever it goes, and that's pretty good at play, in fact, in my opinion. So black actually decided to bring the queen further and try to improve upon that idea that I just mentioned, and rook d4, covering against these crucial squares and threats, really. Rook e2. Now it looks like black is actually better, but in fact white has a pretty good defense here, in my opinion, with rook b4 keeping this solid and attacking the b pawn, and b5 was played by Magnus, and the idea is that rook b5, then you have queen c4 check when white is unable to preserve his rook. So you've got to be a little bit careful about it if you're white. But I mean, Anand found a pretty good move with queen h1, covering against all these tender light squares right here, and with the rook covering these two squares, black has no way to make progress in this position, and pretty much we reach a dead drawn here, given that queen b7 is coming. Rook e7, queen d5. Really, white has no problems now because he found this nice queen h1 move, and well, rook e1, queen d7 is a perpetual check. So overall, I think this was a pretty nice and well played game by both sides. Nothing too out of the ordinary. It looks like a pretty good fighting draw, really, where both sides were just not able to execute their plans just to the fullest. But I think both players are pretty satisfied with this kind of opening, given that they both got fighting chances to potentially go against each other's kings, but nothing came about it. Nothing too serious came about it, and well, I mean, I don't think Carlsen broke too many sweats over this position right here when it looked pretty relatively safe all game. And after one of the rooks got off the board, I mean, there's really not many problems for him in this position. So I think a well played game by both sides. All right, guys, that's game one, a draw in game one, and I think this is a pretty, I don't want to say unexciting, but I wanted a decisive result in game one, but that's too much to ask for often. Game one, and you're just trying to get off all the nerves often. I don't know, but I think a pretty exciting game for relatively for game one compared to last year's 10 move draw. So I think this is a good start for both sides, I think. Without well, tomorrow I'll be broadcasting game two. Not broadcasting. What am I talking about? I don't broadcast. Tomorrow I'll be covering game two eventually. Thanks for watching, guys. Really appreciate that you took the time to watch this. See ya.